In a small-town courtroom, a racist judge publicly humiliates a calm black man over a petty traffic violation. The judge's arrogance fills the room, but the man's silent composure hints at a deeper power. One symbolic insult flips the tension, and the final words promise, "This is just the beginning. We don't waste mercy on people like you." The words splintered the stale air of the county courthouse like a whip crack. Judge Harold Whitman leaned back in his high-backed leather chair, smirking at the man standing before him. His robe looked almost too big on his aging frame, but the authority he projected made him seem larger than life, at least to himself. The spectators shifted on the creaking wooden benches. A mix of tired faces and tight lips. Few regulars whispered behind hands, relishing the drama. A single ceiling fan spun uselessly above, stirring warm air that smelled of old papers and cold sweat. Marcus James Lewis stood at the center of it all. He wore a fitted charcoal suit, a pale blue tie, and shoes polished to a quiet shine. Didn't fidget, didn't blink too much, didn't look down, and that alone irritated Whitman more than any argument could have. Whitman leaned forward, thick fingers drumming the bench. His pale eyes narrowed. "So, Mr. Lewis, you think driving through my town means my rules don't apply? You think you're above the law because you come from wherever you people crawl out of?" A nervous cough came from the clerk's desk. She kept her eyes on her notes, refusing to meet Marcus's steady gaze. The bailiff shifted his weight, palm resting on the handle of his holstered gun, just in case. Marcus exhaled slowly. He could feel the contempt dripping off the bench like stale coffee. He studied the judge's face, the faint flush in the cheeks, the practiced sneer. He'd seen that look before, in boardrooms and back rooms and police stations where men, like Whitman, hid behind titles. He said nothing. Whitman raised a hand, almost casual. "Deputy, bring me that citation." The deputy hustled forward, handing over a single sheet of paper. Marcus's traffic ticket. A made-up violation for rolling a stop sign that didn't even exist at the intersection listed. Whitman waved it in the air like a dirty rag. $100 fine. That's what this says. But for your attitude, for wasting this court's precious time, let's adjust it, shall we? Marcus tilted his head, no emotion crossing his face. Whitman ripped the ticket in half. Then he ripped it again. He let the scraps flutter down like confetti before the wedding of an execution. The spectators' eyes widened. A few sucked in breath, sensing the humiliation served cold. New, fine, $5,000. Cash, paid today. Whitman's grin was sharp, hungry, or you can spend the weekend in county lockup. Maybe that'll teach you to respect my court. Slowly bent down, picked up the scraps of paper from the floor. The hush in the room deepened. He brushed off invisible dust, slipped the shredded paper into his pocket, and straightened to his full height, tall enough to meet Whitman's eyes without effort. Behind the calm mask, a flicker of heat stirred in Marcus's chest, but his voice was steady, smooth as polished stone. "Your Honor, I appreciate the lesson." The judge's grin faltered for half a heartbeat. Marcus stepped forward, close enough for only the front row to hear. He leaned in just enough to make Whitman recoil a fraction. "And I promise you this, by the time I'm finished here, you'll be the one paying." The clerk's pen froze mid-scratch. A young reporter in the back row felt his pulse jump as he scribbled Marcus's name. The bailiff's hand twitched on his belt. Whitman slammed his gavel down, the echo bouncing off the cracked plaster walls. Get him out of my sight. Next case. But as Marcus turned, the room saw something that Whitman didn't. The faint curl of a smile tugging at the corner of Marcus's mouth. Not arrogance. Something quieter, sharper, like a blade slipping into its sheath. Waiting, he pushed open the heavy wooden doors, the hinges groaning in protest. The murmurs rose behind him, questions no one would say aloud. Not yet. Outside, the hot sun hit him full in the face. Marcus paused on the steps, reached into his pocket, and ran a thumb over the shredded ticket. Symbolic trash, spark for something bigger. He looked back once at the courthouse dome, white paint peeling like an old lie. Then he pulled out his phone, eyes narrowing as he scrolled to a single contact saved only as IA. His thumb hovered, the courthouse's shadow long on the pavement. He pressed call and smiled. The courthouse doors shut behind Marcus with a dull thud that echoed down the narrow hallway. Inside, the courtroom remained tense, even as the next name was called. Judge Whitman drummed his fingers on the bench, trying to focus on the next trembling defendant. But the quiet confidence on Marcus's face stuck in his mind like a thorn under skin outside. The marble hallway hummed with whispers. A young clerk leaned against a water cooler, phone pressed to her ear. "I'm telling you, he didn't even flinch," she said, voice low. Whitman ripped up the ticket, fined him $5,000, and the guy just smiled. At the other end, her sister gasped. "Who was he?"
Awkward.
"But he's not from here, that's for sure. Some city type." He walked out like he owned the place. The clerk's supervisor shot her a glare. She quickly hung up and shuffled a stack of blank forms to look busy. Down the hall, an old janitor pushed his mop slowly, eyes narrowed, replaying the moment in his mind. He'd been in that courtroom for 20 years, seen plenty of scared faces, but never that look of calm defiance. Not like that. In the judge's chambers, Whitman slammed his door harder than he meant to. The framed diploma on the wall rattled. Slightly, he pulled off his robe and tossed it over the back of his leather chair. Sweat beaded on his forehead, though the air conditioner rattled on high. He poured himself a glass of water, his hand trembling just enough to spill a drop onto. The paperwork stacked neatly on his desk. He sat down heavily and flipped Marcus's file open again. A simple traffic violation, an out-of-state license. No priors. Address in the city's upscale quarter. Whitman's eyes narrowed. He jabbed at the note at the bottom. Former federal clerk. Lips twisted. "Clerk, so what? We'll learn." "Who holds the gavel here?" he muttered to himself, reassured by the silence of the chamber. Outside, his clerk knocked gently before peeking in. "Sir, there's a reporter asking questions." Whitman waved her off without looking up.
Tell
"Them nothing." "Ah! It's over." She hesitated, "But sir, they're asking who Mr. Lewis is." "They say people want to know." Whitman's eyes flicked up, cold and sharp. "Then tell them he's nobody." Slammed the file shut with a snap that made the clerk flinch. She backed out, closing the door behind her, across town. Marcus sat alone in a corner booth at a rundown diner that smelled faintly of burnt coffee and bacon grease. His suit jacket hung neatly beside him, folded over the cracked vinyl seat. The shredded remains of the ticket sat on the table, pressed flat under his fingertips like a puzzle he no longer needed to solve. The waitress, an older woman with tired eyes, filled his mug without asking. She watched him carefully, as if waiting for him to say something that explained everything. He thanked her with a polite nod, then returned his gaze to his phone. He scrolled through a list of contacts. Names and numbers most people in that town would never believe he had. The cursor hovered over Federal District Liaison. He tapped out a short text, subject confirmed. Local corruption deeper than expected, moving forward as planned. He hit send, then pocketed the phone. He sipped the coffee slowly, eyes tracing the smudged window where sunlight caught drifting. Dust motes. Outside, cars rolled past pickups and old sedans with rusted bumpers and faded bumper stickers, promising simpler times. Marcus's reflection in the glass was calm, but the pulse at his neck ticked steady. He knew this game too well. Men like Whitman always thought small fines and bigger threats kept their world safe and neat. But Whitman had torn up the wrong man's paper today at the diner counter. Two local contractors in paint-stained jeans whispered over breakfast plates. "You hear about that guy in court?" one asked, wiping egg yolk from his beard. The other shrugged. "What about him?" He stared Whitman down like he was the judge. "We'll regret that," the second man said. The first one wasn't so sure. Back at the courthouse, Whitman adjusted his tie in the mirror. He told himself he'd crushed plenty of big-talking men before. This would be no different. But when he looked at himself, saw a flicker of doubt in his own eyes, and he hated it. In the hallway, a young clerk who'd watched Marcus leave stood by the records counter, telling anyone who'd listen he didn't look scared. Not one bit. Down the street, Marcus stepped out of the diner, the bell above the door jangling behind him. He looked back at the courthouse dome rising above the town square. He checked his watch, the metal catching the sun. His phone buzzed. Once in his pocket, a reply from the liaison. He read it, lips curving into the faintest smile. The courthouse always felt like Whitman's fortress. For 20 years, marble floors and oak-paneled walls wrapped him in the comfort of power, the same cold walls that now seemed to lean in closer each hour since. Marcus Lewis walked out. Whitman's office door clicked shut behind him. He poured another glass of cheap whiskey into his water tumbler, ice cubes clinking like brittle bones. He never drank at work, at least, not when anyone was watching, but the taste steadied his shaking hand. He pulled Marcus's file back, out of the cabinet, thumbing through the same thin pages he'd read 3 times that morning. No criminal record, good education, law school. Clerked at a federal court, Whitman snorted. So what, he told himself. A kid with a fancy degree was nothing in his court. But his mind kept replaying that promise. By the time I'm finished here, you'll be the one paying. Whitman muttered. Big talk. He snapped the file shut and dropped it on the desk. Down the hall, the clerk leaned over a records counter, phone pressed to her ear. Mom, did you hear about Judge Whitman today? Yeah, the man you fined? He's not like the others. He didn't even blink. He told the judge he'd pay him back. I swear, Mom, you should have seen Whitman's face. Outside, the courthouse steps buzzed with whispers. Local shop owners paused to talk. The coffee shop next door was full of stories. Some said Marcus was a big city lawyer. Some said he was connected to the FBI. Some swore he was just trouble looking for trouble. But nobody could explain the quiet confidence in his eyes. Marcus knew exactly how rumors worked in small towns. He'd counted on them. By the time he returned to his rental car parked 2 blocks down, a fresh text waited for him. Background checks ready? Want details? He slid behind the wheel, engine humming. He typed back, send everything. The reply came. Seconds later, attachments, bullet points, financial records, all wrapped up in a tidy encrypted file. He opened it on the car's dashboard screen, scanning line by line. Off the books fines. Quiet deals with developers. Few names he recognized. People who'd paid Whitman to make legal problems disappear. Marcus's lips tightened into a hard line. Corruption this deep was rarely sloppy. Whitman had gotten comfortable. That made him reckless. Reckless men made mistakes. Back inside, Whitman stepped into the hallway, plastering on a forced smile for a local councilman waiting to shake his hand. The man asked if the rumors were true, some city hotshot disrespecting the bench. Whitman waved it off with a greasy laugh. Just some punk. I'll make an example of him if he comes back. These people don't know how our system works. His hand tightened too hard in the handshake, and the councilman felt it a crack in the marble mask Whitman wore so well. By afternoon, Marcus sat in a dusty law office he'd rented by the week. The blinds were half shut, dust motes spinning in the stale air. On the wall hung old diplomas from local lawyers, long-dead ghosts that couldn't help Whitman now. Marcus dialed another number, an old colleague from the bureau who owed him a favor. The man picked up on the first ring. Lewis, haven't heard from you in a while. What's the fire? Marcus leaned back, boots crossed under the desk. Need a sealed record pulled? Judge Harold Whitman. Everything you can find. Clean version. Dirty version. I want it all. The man on the other end whistled. He piss you off? Marcus's eyes narrowed at the cracked ceiling tile above him. He thinks he owns people. I'm about to remind him he doesn't. A laugh crackled through the speaker. Fair enough. Give me 48 hours. Make it 24, Marcus said. He's pushing my timeline. He hung up, then stared at the files on his screen. Names, dates, hidden bank transfers, pieces of a puzzle. Whitman thought nobody would bother to finish. But Marcus had built his whole career on finishing what other people called impossible. Outside, the sun sank lower, throwing long shadows over the courthouse dome. Whitman watched it from his office window, tie loosened, collar damp with sweat. He told himself he still held the cards. He'd break this stranger with fines, court delays, legal threats, same as always. But when he closed his eyes, he He saw Marcus's calm face. No fear. Just that promise ringing in his ears. You'll be the one paying. For the first time in years. Whitman found himself wondering not if he'd win, but how long before someone saw through the marble walls he'd built around his secrets. Marcus closed his laptop, the hum of his plan gathering like thunder rolling in behind distant hills. The courthouse lights flickered on for the night shift. The war had started, and only one of them knew the rules. Marcus sat in the back booth of a dim cafe, 2 blocks from the courthouse. His laptop glowed in the shadows, the hum of the old fridge mixing with muffled chatter from the lunch crowd. The waitress who'd served him the same black coffee all week watched him carefully from behind the counter. She knew he was here for more than caffeine. On the screen, files scrolled line by line, parking fines that never made it to the town's accounts, property deals that slipped through zoning boards with a wink and a nod, names of people who paid to stay out of jail. Marcus read each detail with the same calm, surgical focus he'd used on real criminals for years. Across town, Whitman paced his chambers, sleeves rolled to his elbows, tie loose and crooked. The blinds were half closed, slats throwing broken stripes of sunlight on the worn carpet. On his desk sat 2 cell phones, his official county phone and another older, unregistered, prepaid. The second phone buzzed every few minutes now. Each new message made his gut twist tighter. He picked it up again, thumb hovering over a text that simply read, "People are talking. Handle it." He tossed the phone back on the desk. The quiet hiss of the air conditioner couldn't drown out the pounding in his ears. At the local newspaper office, Riley Grant, the only reporter under 30, leaned over his battered desk littered with cold pizza crusts and yesterday's notes. His editor, a gruff man named Bell, tapped a thick finger on Riley's computer screen. "Where'd you hear about this Lewis guy?" Riley shrugged. "Court clerk. She says Whitman humiliated him, ripped up his ticket, hit him with 5 grand fine, but the guy didn't even blink. She swears he's connected. Maybe government?" Bell scoffed. "Hotshot lawyer picking a fight with Whitman? It's suicide. Or news," Riley shot back. He flipped through his notes, names, addresses, a blurry photo of Marcus stepping out of the courthouse. Something's here. You know how this town works. When someone pushes back, people talk. When they talk too much, they slip. Bell grunted, rubbing his jaw. "Fine, keep sniffing, but keep it quiet. Whitman's got half the council in his pocket. You get me in trouble, you're buying my coffee for life." Riley smirked. "Deal." That afternoon, Marcus sat in his rental car again, engine off, window cracked to let the stale summer air roll through. He watched the courthouse steps like a hawk, who went in, who came out, who lingered too long talking to Whitman's bailiff. His phone buzzed. A single line. Package delivered. He allowed himself a small nod. Step 1 was done. Inside, Whitman's clerk, Emily, slipped a manila envelope into her purse, eyes darting around the empty hallway. She'd found it on her desk. No name, just a note. "They know. Help us see." Her hands trembled as she tucked it under her coat. For years, she'd watched Whitman's backroom deals from the shadows, files that vanished, cases adjusted, poor families fined into silence. She told herself it wasn't her problem, but Marcus's calm stare in court had cracked something open in her. Maybe she was tired of pretending after her shift. She ducked into a phone booth 2 blocks away, the last working booth in town. Her breath fogged the glass. She dialed the number scribbled inside the envelope. A calm voice answered on the second ring. "Special counsel's office." Emily's voice shook. "I have information. About the judge. And the man he fined." A pause. "Then who are you?" "Someone who wants out," she said, glancing back at the courthouse dome glowing in the sunset. "One who's done. Watching him get away with it?" In the diner where Marcus waited, his phone buzzed once, a single coded ping. He read the message, then turned to the window, watching the last orange slice of daylight vanish behind the rooftops. Whitman poured himself another glass of whiskey, then slammed the bottle down so hard the amber liquid sloshed over the rim. He didn't bother wiping it up. He barked at his reflection in the window glass. "They won't touch me, they can't." But the voice in his head, the one he couldn't drown in cheap liquor, whispered that maybe they already had Emily. Stepped out of the phone booth, the night air crisp on her flushed cheeks. She clutched her purse tighter, heartbeat hammering. She didn't know Marcus's full plan. She didn't want to. She just knew this time she wouldn't be part of the silence. And Marcus, lone in the diner's last flickering neon light, knew. The leak had started a crack that would widen until the whole rotten wall fell in. The next morning, dawn crawled slow over the courthouse dome, painting cracks in the marble facade with gold. But the shine didn't touch Judge Whitman's office, where stale whiskey and stale fear clung to the stale air. Whitman sat slumped at his desk, shirt wrinkled, tie missing. He hadn't slept. The second phone buzzed again. He ignored it. The morning news droned from an old TV mounted in the corner, but one headline snapped his eyes wide. Local judge. Facing questions over disappearing finesse the newscaster, a fresh-faced woman with a stiff smile recited the line without a hint of emotion. Whitman lunged for the remote and muted it, but the words still echoed off the walls. He slammed his fist on the desk. Papers jumped. A pen clattered to the floor. In town, the coffee shop buzzed, louder than usual. Farmers, contractors, old ladies in church hats, they all murmured the same name. Whitman. Disappearing fines. Did you hear about that black lawyer, the one he tried to bury? Riley Grant, the young reporter, sipped burnt coffee in the back corner. He clicked through his phone, eyes darting between screens and the door. He'd received the envelope at dawn. Same unmarked handwriting, same direct evidence. It was real, Whitman's fake fines, the hush payments, the hidden slush fund. All of it neat and undeniable. Riley's editor, Bell, called 5 times before sunrise. Each time he barked the same question. Are you sure? And each time Riley said, the same thing, yeah, I'm sure. A doorbell chimed softly as Marcus stepped into the cafe, scanning the morning crowd. He moved like a shadow, quiet, composed. No suit today. Dark jeans, clean jacket, a messenger bag slung over his shoulder. He caught Riley's eye and nodded toward the booth by the back window. Riley stuffed his phone in his pocket and followed. He slid into the cracked leather seat, trying not to look as nervous as he felt. Marcus didn't waste time. You have it, Marcus asked. Riley pulled out the envelope, slid it across the table. This is enough to sink him. If half of this sticks, Whitman's finished. Marcus rested a hand on the paper but didn't open it. He trusted the leak for now. Print it. Ow! All of it. No pulling punches. Riley swallowed. You know he'll come after me? My editor. The paper. Marcus's calm eyes met his. I know. But the truth protects better than silence. A beat of quiet settled between them. Riley nodded, trying to look brave. He pocketed his recorder, hands trembling just a little. Meanwhile, across town, Whitman barked orders into his office phone, voice hoarse from rage and fear. Find out who's talking, who's leaking. Pull every clerk's files, background checks, family debts. Affairs, I want leverage on everyone. His bailiff stood by the door, shifting his weight, uneasy. Sir, it's too late. People are talking. The paper, then shut them up. Whitman roared, hurling his empty glass at the wall. It shattered, glass raining down over the diploma. He'd once framed so proudly. The bailiff flinched but said nothing. Marcus left the cafe without another word to Riley. Outside, he walked the short block to the courthouse steps. He stood at the bottom, looking up at the building that had been Whitman's fortress for decades. He could feel the shift in the air, the way people slowed their steps when they saw him, the way some nodded, a silent thank you passing between strangers. A single rumor could die overnight. But evidence that lingered like a stain you couldn't wash out. From the shadows across the street, Emily watched him, the courthouse clerk. Her heart pounded when their eyes met. Marcus gave her the smallest nod, not enough for anyone else to see, but enough to remind her she wasn't alone in this fight. Back inside, Whitman slammed open a cabinet, yanking out an old file. Names of local allies, favors owed, old deals made in dark corners. He needed backup. He needed silence. He needed fear. But for the first time in his long reign, fear wasn't his weapon alone. It belonged to the town now. Fear of what they'd find if they kept digging. Fear of being dragged under with him. And once fear turned against its master, it didn't stop. That night, Marcus sat in his motel room, the cheap lamp throwing a dull yellow pool over piles of papers. He checked the clock, 11:59 p.m. He opened his laptop, logged into a secure portal, and typed a single line. Leak confirmed. More coming. Whitman won't last the month. He hit send. Somewhere under the courthouse dome, a crack deepened. The first tremor had come. And Marcus's new tremors always led to collapse. The courthouse parking lot looked different at night, empty rows. Cracked lamps buzzing with tired light, shadows stretching across oil-stained pavement. Judge Whitman sat in the back seat of a black sedan parked near the side entrance. The driver, an old deputy who'd been loyal for years, kept glancing at the rearview mirror, uneasy. Whitman sipped coffee that had long since gone cold. His eyes were bloodshot, restless, darting to the courthouse door every few seconds. Word had spread to fast rumors, leaks, news articles that wouldn't die. He needed to shut Marcus down, and he needed to do it now. When Marcus finally appeared, stepping from the shadows with that same calm walk, Whitman's pulse spiked. He'd told the deputy to call him if the man showed up, but he hadn't expected Marcus to stroll right up to his car. Marcus tapped the window once, as a gentleman asking for directions. Ash. Whitman pressed the button. The window whirred down halfway. You really think you're untouchable, Lewis? Whitman rasped, voice low, forced steady. Marcus didn't flinch. Judge Whitman, I see you're still working late. Impressive. The sarcasm slid between them like a blade. Whitman leaned forward, breathing stale coffee and panic. You can come into my town, stir up my people. Drag my name through the dirt, it's not your town, Harold. Marcus cut in, voice soft but unyielding. And your name dragged itself through the dirt long before I showed up, the deputy shifted in the front seat, eyes on the dash. He'd never seen anyone talk to Whitman like that, not in 20 years. Whitman's jaw clenched. You think you're smart? You think you know how this game works? But I've buried bigger threats than you. Marcus studied him, the sagging eyes, the sweat on his collar. He almost felt pity. Almost, you should worry less about burying people, Marcus said, leaning closer so only Whitman could hear, and more about who's digging behind your back. Whitman's hand twitched as if to reach for the door handle, but he stopped himself. Is that a threat? Marcus's eyes glinted in the flickering lamplight. No, just a fact. He stepped back, calm as ever. The deputy looked over his shoulder. Sir, we done? Whitman snapped. Drive. As the sedan rolled away, Marcus stood still under the broken lamp. The wind carried a faint rustle of leaves and the distant hum of a train. Small-town sounds that covered bigger secrets. Inside the car, Whitman's thoughts spun like broken gears. He knows too much. Someone's feeding him. His fists tightened. On his knees? He'd trusted the wrong people too long, his own clerk, the deputy, maybe even the DA who owed him favors. His empire, built on fear and silence, felt suddenly paper-thin. Marcus walked back to his car, a rented black sedan that looked plain, but hid enough surveillance gear to watch half the block, slip behind the wheel, check the small device under the dash. The tiny mic had picked up every word Whitman spat through the half-open window. He saved the audio file, labeling it threat number 1. The folder already held video clips, bank records, scanned files, phone logs, each piece a nail for Whitman's coffin. At a small motel outside town, Emily sat on her bed, phone pressed to her ear. Marcus's voice came through steady on the line. He's cracking. Next step is yours. Emily's hand trembled as she scribbled more notes on a legal pad. What if he figures out it's me? He already suspects everyone, Marcus said. That's his weakness. He trusts nobody. Just keep feeding the files. You're doing good, Emily. She swallowed, forcing courage into her voice. What happens when this blows up? It already has, Marcus replied. He hung up before she could answer. In the sedan, Whitman's mind raced with old favors he could call in. Maybe the county commissioner, maybe the old sheriff. Someone still owed him enough to shut Marcus down. He muttered to himself, ignoring the deputy's uneasy glances. He didn't see the second sedan parked across the street, Riley Grant with his camera ready, snapping a grainy photo of Whitman's secret meeting under the lot's flickering lights. The young reporter knew this would be his lead shot, the beginning of the end. At midnight, Marcus uploaded the audio to his secure server. Another piece on the chessboard. Another trap Whitman had stumbled into with his own arrogance. Outside, the motel window crickets sang under the moon's pale eye. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, tie undone, shirt sleeves rolled up. He knew the judge would strike back soon. Desperate men always did. But desperation made them sloppy. And Marcus had built his career on men like Whitman, men who thought their power made them untouchable. Men who always forgot the law works best when it's quiet and patient, till it roars. Rain hit the courthouse dome like muted drumbeats that night. Streetlights threw watery halos over empty sidewalks. Marcus sat in the same diner booth he'd claimed all week, a corner table by the window. Blinds half drawn, a cold cup of black coffee in front of him. He wasn't alone this time. Across from him sat a tall, broad-shouldered man in a raincoat, a face that belonged more to federal task force raids than sleepy-town diners. This was Caleb Bryant, Marcus's old friend from Internal Affairs. He'd flown in that afternoon. Slipping through town unnoticed? You're sure he'll take the bait? Caleb asked, voice low enough to drown under the rain pattering the glass. Marcus gave a faint smile. Men like Whitman always do. He can't stand people watching. So, we make sure everyone's watching. Caleb flipped open a thin black folder. Inside were photos, bank statements, property ledgers, evidence that hadn't seen daylight in years. Some tied Whitman to hush money schemes. Others traced back to sealed files that Marcus had quietly cracked open. He's got dirt on half. This town, Caleb muttered. No wonder he thought he was untouchable. Fear kept him safe, Marcus said. We're replacing fear with exposure. He tapped the folder once, decisive. Tonight he'll try to scare me. Tomorrow, we show everyone what a bully looks like when his secrets hit daylight. Across town, Whitman slammed his whiskey glass down so hard, the cheap motels sighed. Table cracked. He'd left his house for a small roadside room under a false name, anything to stay ahead of Marcus's quiet storm. He'd spent the evening pacing the carpet thin, replaying that confrontation in the parking lot. Who's digging behind your back? It crawled under his skin. It barked into his burner phone, voice shaking. I want him followed. I want pressure. If he wants war, we give him war. The voice on the other end, a shady fixer Whitman hadn't used in years, sounded unimpressed. This guy isn't a nobody, Harold. He's covered. Then find his cracks. Whitman spat. Everyone has cracks. But the line went dead, leaving Whitman alone with the thunder outside and his pulse hammering behind his eyes. At the diner, Marcus tucked the folder back into his bag. He handed Caleb a small USB drive. Take this to the bureau tonight. Worst case, you release it all. Every file, every transfer, every backroom deal. No more shadows. Caleb's nod was slow, a rare flicker of respect in his steely gaze. When this goes public, you'll make enemies. Big ones. Marcus's smile was calm, edges sharp. I already have. A bell above the door chimed as Marcus stepped out. Into the rain, he pulled his coat tighter, eyes flicking across the empty street. Two figures leaned against a parked car across from the diner. Local toughs Whitman thought could scare him off. Marcus almost laughed at the predictability. He walked straight toward them, rain dripping from his hair onto his collar. One stepped. Forward, chest puffed. You, Marcus Lewis. Marcus stopped 2 feet away, calm as a surgeon before the first cut. That's right, the thug sneered. You causing trouble for the judge? Maybe you should pack up and leave town tonight. Marcus's gaze flicked to the other man, a thin kid, nervous, hands stuffed in his hoodie pocket, paid muscle. With no stomach for real heat, Marcus took 1 step closer. Tell Whitman I'm not leaving. Tell him he just made tomorrow's front page. The older thug blinked. What front page? Marcus didn't answer. He stepped past them, unfazed. The thin kid called after him, voice cracking. "Hey, you think you're safe?" Marcus paused at his car door, turning back with a cold, almost amused smile. "Not safe, just ready." He drove away, wipers thumping, the two hired shadows left stranded in the rain. From a window above the diner, Riley Grant snapped grainy. "Shots! The attempted intimidation, the failed threat. Another piece for the morning headline." In his motel room, Whitman slammed his burner phone onto the cheap laminate desk so hard it split at the hinge. "Idiots," he hissed at the rain-soaked window. "He's mocking me." Outside, thunder rolled across the fields beyond town. It felt closer now, like the storm Marcus had promised was crawling up Whitman's spine, hungry for the lies he had buried for decades. At dawn, Emily would slip another folder under Riley's door, the next leak in Whitman's sinking ship. The clerk who'd kept quiet for years was now the town's secret whistle in the dark, and Marcus, sitting in his car outside his motel, watched the courthouse lights flicker in the distance. The trap was set. Whitman had stepped right into it. All that remained was to spring it and watch the fear that once protected the judge become the fire that burned him down. The next sunrise broke cold and pale over Main Street. A damp wind rattled the courthouse flag against its pole, snapping like a warning shot in the early hush. Inside the local newsstand, Riley's front page burned brighter than the morning sun. Local judge. Accused of corruption. New evidence exposed. Riley's byline sat bold under the headline. Below, a grainy photo of Marcus standing face to face with Whitman's hired muscle. A second shot, Emily's leaked documents, crisp and damning. Fines that never made it to city ledgers, fake signatures, ghost accounts. The town hadn't seen a scandal like this in decades. At the courthouse steps, Whitman's bailiff tried to wave reporters away. But more kept coming. Small-town journalists, local bloggers, even a few bigger city cameras drawn by the scent of rot in the sleepy place. Whispers filled the marble halls, clerks, bailiffs, secretaries, all pretending to work while their eyes flicked to doorways, waiting for Marcus to appear, and appear he did. Marcus stepped out of a black sedan at 9:01 a.m., calm as if he were late for Sunday coffee. No suit today, a clean dark blazer, a neat tie, a slim folder tucked under his arm. He didn't rush. He didn't hide. He walked the front steps like they belonged to him. Reporters turned as one, microphones shooting forward. "Mr. Lewis, is it true you're behind the leaks? Are you pressing charges? Do you work for the government?" Marcus paused halfway up the steps, turning to face them. His eyes swept the small crowd, measuring the fear, the hope, the hunger for truth. Then he lifted the folder, tapped it once for the cameras. "Every lie has a paper trail," he said, voice clear as a church bell in the cold. "And every paper trail leads to the truth." Behind the glass doors, Whitman watched, teeth grinding. His robe lay draped over his arm, a costume that felt heavier each minute. He spun to Emily, who stood stiff by the door. "Call the sheriff. I want Lewis arrested for harassment, intimidation, whatever sticks." Emily's lips barely moved. "On what grounds, sir?" Whitman's eyes flared red. "Don't question me. Do it." Emily didn't move, didn't even blink. And in that small silence, Whitman saw it, loyalty slipping through like water through cracked marble in the main hallway. The courthouse staff murmured as Marcus entered. Some stepped back to give him room. Others nodded, small, respectful. Dips of the head that said, "We see you, we know." He walked straight to the clerk's window, handed over a single sheet. "I'd like to file an injunction. Judicial misconduct, financial tampering, abuse of power." The young clerk behind the glass blinked at the paperwork. His hands trembled as he stamped it, a sound that echoed like a gunshot in the tents. Hallway. Whitman burst through the side door, robe half on, voice booming false thunder. "You have no standing here, Lewis. You're an outsider. You have no jurisdiction." Marcus turned, eyes calm, voice steady. "Do now." He nodded to Riley, who stepped forward with a press badge and a rolling camera. Behind Riley, Caleb. Bryant appeared, flashing his federal credentials for all to see. Harold Whitman, Caleb said, voice cold, badge glinting under courthouse lights. You're under investigation for judicial fraud and financial conspiracy. I'd advise you to stand down. Whitman's laugh was brittle, desperate. You think the feds scare me? This is my court? But the hush that fell around him said otherwise. The bailiff at his shoulder didn't move. The clerk behind the counter didn't look up. Emily, standing by the wall, met Marcus's eyes and gave the tiniest nod she'd done her part. Marcus stepped closer, folder in hand. You built this place on fear and secrets, Harold. But fear only works when people stay quiet. Outside, the reporters caught every word. Lenses pressed to the glass like hungry eyes. Whitman's robe slipped from his shoulder, pooling at his elbow. For a moment, the great judge looked small, just another man whose empire cracked under its own weight. He lunged for Marcus as rage drowning reason. But Caleb's hand was already there, palm flat on Whitman's chest. Enough. Step back. Whitman's roar died on his lips. He stumbled back, robe half off, eyes darting around for allies who wouldn't meet his gaze. Marcus didn't flinch. He stepped past him, handed the folder to Caleb. Finish it. In that single breath, the courthouse. Halls changed forever. A place built to silence men like Marcus now rang with the promise that silence was done. Outside, the wind carried whispers to every corner of town. People peered from behind cafe windows, store counters, porch railings, watching power shift right in front of them. And Whitman, once the man who finds strangers to remind them of their place, now stood exposed at the top of his marble stairs, the king with no kingdom. The judge with no fear left to trade. The courthouse felt colder than it had in years. The marble floors that once reflected Whitman's pride now echoed. With every desperate footstep he took, searching for any shred of loyalty, but the bailiffs looked away when he passed. The clerks whispered when he slammed his office door, inside. He paced the same carpet he'd worn thin with power, now worn thin with fear. His eyes darted to the half-empty whiskey bottle on the shelf. He reached for it, paused, then snatched his hand back as if the glass burned. On his desk lay the newspaper. Riley's headline had burned across town, Judge Whitman under federal investigation. Underneath it, a photo of Marcus on the courthouse steps, calm, unmoved. Everything Whitman no longer was. He grabbed his phone and dialed a number he'd sworn he'd never call. It rang once, twice, then a familiar voice answered, dry, amused, dangerous. Harold, I wondered when you'd crawl back. Whitman's voice cracked. I need your help, a low chuckle. After 10 years, you cut me out, remember? I said, you didn't need me. This is different. There's a man I know who he is. Everyone knows who he is now. The line went silent. Then the voice added, no one wants to touch you, Harold. Not anymore. Click. The line died. Whitman lowered the phone, staring at his trembling hands. He'd spent years building favors like bricks in a fortress. Now the walls were gone, the bricks dust under his feet. As night fell, he slipped from the courthouse through a side exit, coat collar pulled up, hat low over his eyes. He drove without headlights through back roads, gravel popping under his tires. He parked beside a dead gas station, its neon sign half broken, buzzing into the darkness. Marcus was waiting for him, leaning against a rusted pump under the flickering light. No entourage, no badge showing. It's just him, calm as ever. Arms crossed. Whitman stepped out, breath fogging in the cold air. For a moment, they just stared, predator and prey. They both knew who was who now. You're digging up things you don't understand. Whitman growled, voice raw. Marcus tilted his head slightly. Try me. Whitman took 2 steps closer, lowering his voice like a salesman pitching poison. You want me gone? Fine, I'll resign. Quietly, I'll step down. No trial, no headlines. But you stop this. You bury the rest. You walk away. A smirk tugged at Marcus's mouth, cold, humorless. So your offer is, you leave quietly, and the people you hurt never get their truth? Whitman's lip curled. I built this town. I kept it safe. You think they want this mess out in the open? You think they want to see how deep it goes? Marcus took 1 step forward, his shoes crunching gravel. The neon flickered above him, painting his face in cold blue shadows. They deserve to know exactly how deep it goes. They deserve to decide what they do with the truth, not you. Whitman's shoulders hunched, the weight of decades pulling him lower. You think they'll thank you? They'll turn on you, just like they're turning on me. Marcus's eyes were steady, merciless. They don't need to thank me. They just need to see you for who you are. The judge laughed then, a hollow, broken sound that bounced off the dead pumps and cracked windows. He looked smaller than ever, coat flapping in the cold wind. You think you're better than me? Whitman sneered. Marcus shook his head once. No, Harold. I think I remember who I work for. You forgot. Somewhere behind them, a car door. Slammed. Caleb emerged from the shadows, badge flashing in the neon light. He stepped forward, cuffs in hand. Whitman's eyes widened. You can't arrest me here. You're not being arrested here. Caleb cut in. You're being taken in for questioning, federal holding. We have more to talk about. Marcus didn't flinch as Caleb stepped past him. He just watched as Whitman's shoulders sagged, the fight draining out like water from a cracked glass. The cuffs clicked shut around wrists that once slammed, avels down like thunder. Whitman's eyes flicked to Marcus one last time, desperate, angry, lost. What do you get out of this? Whitman rasped. Marcus's voice was quiet, but cut through the dark like steel. Justice. Or as close as we can get. Fuck. Caleb led Whitman to the car, door slamming shut behind him. The neon sign buzzed one last time, then flickered out darkness. Swallowing the dead station, Marcus stood alone for a moment longer, feeling the cold bite through his coat. One man down. One truth dragged into the light. And the town that once feared Whitman now watched, learning that even the tallest marble walls crumble when you know where to strike. The courthouse steps were quiet the next. Morning, no cameras now, no shouting crowds, just soft sunlight creeping. Across the marble that had seen too much silence, the flag above fluttered in a gentle breeze. No longer weighed down by secrets it had flown over for too long. Inside, Emily sat at the clerk's desk, sorting through boxes of Whitman's sealed files. Each paper she pulled out felt like a stone lifted off her chest. A dozen other clerks joined her, eyes tired but determined. For the first time, they didn't whisper when they spoke. They didn't flinch when the phone rang. The fear that had filled these halls like stale air was gone. Riley stood near the door, camera bag slung over his shoulder. He'd filed the last piece just before dawn, A Town's Reckoning. Whitman removed, investigation widens. His editor had called him reckless, brilliant, insane, probably all three. But for the first time in his short career, Riley felt like a real reporter. He caught Emily's eye through the glass, lifted a coffee as if to say thank you. She nodded back, no words needed. Out front, Marcus sat on the courthouse steps, coat draped beside him, tie loosened. Eyes turned to the street that had watched him stand alone and unbothered when it mattered most. He looked calm, not triumphant, not smug, just settled in a way that told the town it wasn't him they should thank, but themselves. Caleb joined him, 2 coffees in hand, one paper bag folded neatly under his arm. "Oh, town's quieter now," he said, dropping onto the step beside Marcus. "It'll stay loud for a while," Marcus said, accepting the coffee. "Truth rattles the bones before it settles." Caleb smirked, shaking his head. "You really think they'll hold the line? After you're gone?" Marcus took a sip, eyes still on the street where people peeked from shop windows, bus stops, porches. "They don't have to hold my line. They just have to remember how to draw their own." Behind them, the heavy courthouse doors creaked open. A new judge, young local, shoulders squared with a kind of quiet resolve, stepped through. She paused, seeing Marcus there, then gave him a respectful nod before heading down the steps. She would not thank him. She didn't need to. Presence was enough. Caleb leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You could stay, you know. They'd line up to work under you. DA's office, even the state wants you back." Marcus's smile was faint, warm in a tired way. And steal their moment. "No, this is theirs. My job was to crack the marble. Rebuilding isn't mine to own." Down the street, Whitman's house sat empty now, its windows dark, its blinds pulled tight. Some townsfolk said they'd seen him driven out in cuffs, eyes hollow. Others said they didn't see anything at all. Maybe that was worse for him, being invisible in the place he thought he owned. Marcus stood, thought stretching the ache from his back. He picked up his coat, folded it over his arm. Caleb handed him the paper bag. Inside sat the last copy of Riley's front page, sealed in plastic. "Souvenir?" Caleb asked. Marcus gave him a half-smile, proof for anyone who forgets that silence isn't forever. He stepped down the last stair, shoes crunching on gravel that had once carried Whitman's echoing threats. Now the only echo was the promise that truth would wait as long as it had to. Emily stepped out behind him, clutching a stack of old files. "Where will you go?" she asked, voice soft, but stronger than he remembered it at first. "Somewhere else someone thinks power makes them untouchable," Marcus said. He glanced at her, sincere. "You did good, Emily. Remember that." She nodded, and for the first time her shoulders didn't hunch when someone praised her. Behind her, the courthouse doors swung open wider, letting in more light than they'd seen in years. Riley lifted his camera one last time. "Mind if I get this shot?" he asked. Marcus paused at the bottom step, coat over one arm, paper bag in his free hand. He turned back, sunlight haloing him against the courthouse behind him, the place he'd fought for, the place he'd left braver than he'd found it. The camera clicked. Somewhere in that photo, a future editor would write a caption about justice, about how power can't stand when people remember the truth is bigger than any marble dome. Marcus walked down Main Street alone, the breeze lifting the edge of his coat. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. The courthouse would stand. The people would talk. And the next time someone like Whitman tried to pull the marble over their eyes, they'd remember the man who walked in alone and left them all standing taller.